Okay, we're going to hear right now from Peter McCarthy with the USGS. And Peter's going to talk about something that I find very interesting, modeling river flow. Okay. And you are all set and ready to roll.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
All right.
I don't see your face, but I see your screen.
All right, well, let's roll with that because I have probably network issues on upload speeds anyways.
That's fine.
Thank you for the introduction, Judd. My name is Peter McCarthy. I'm the Stream Stats Coordinator for the U.S. Geological Survey. My primary job is to run and work with the team of folks that keep the Stream Stats application up and running. The application we're talking about today is actually going to be a different user face and interaction client, but we'll talk a little bit about stream stats as well. So I'm going to give an introduction about stream stats, talk about our stream gauges, a little bit about diatracer studies and how the methods for estimating in-stream velocities and travel times was developed. And then we'll jump into the implementation of that and where we're at with our current client. Typically, if I'm in the room and I can look at everyone, I can ask who's heard of stream stats and have you used it before, but without that ability, I'll just jump in. Stream stats is an online application using GIS data and regression equations to estimate stream flow statistics for gauged and ungauged locations. Essentially, it's the bridge that takes the USGS science and reports and makes it user-friendly for users to be able to get and retrieve stream flow information at gauged and ungauged locations. So when we talk about stream stats and the core functionality, it's really getting at the statistics, whether you need it for flood examples and you're doing bridge designs or you're doing floodplain work, you're building a culvert, you need those statistics to know how big to size those things. So you need it not only where we have gauge stations and actually computed statistics, but you need it for ungauged locations, which is where regional regression equations come into play. The backbone of stream stats is essentially the GIS information. There's many different ways that we can apply and create that underlying GIS data set, but traditionally you'll see us using an NHD product, the National Hydrography data set, and built within that, we're also using the watershed boundary data set and the digital elevation model. With LiDAR data, we're kind of flipping this on the head. And we're starting with the DEM and we're creating WBDs and NHDs from that rather than from topo maps or aerial imagery. Stream Stats is currently a state-by-state project where every state has its own application, its own tools and priorities based upon how it's developed those with their cooperator and stakeholders. And so you may go to South Carolina and find it has different data sets than you will, say, in Montana. And that's essentially driven by cooperator stakeholder interests in how those data products are built locally. We also have regional or basin-based applications, or for example, you can see that we have in St. Louis an application that combines sewer networks with stream stats. So when you delineate, you can delineate up through storm drains back to surface flow or overland flow, and you can see how those networks combine. One of the projects that we've been working on is called a national stream stats application. So rather than working state by state, as I just showed you, we're also working on a national CONUS development or client, where nationally we have this application that uses similar underlying data sets that can work CONUS wide. To do that, we're going to a pre-built, pre-canned data set called NHD Plus version 2. Jumping over the StreamStats user interface, essentially it's a map with a sidebar with some map layers and some basic familiarity. You can navigate the application to delineate basins, compute basin characteristics, and solve regional regression equations. So there's a lot of pieces in StreamStats that prepare us for the upcoming discussion on time of travel. Also built within StreamStats is what we call network navigation tools, and that allows you to drop a raindrop on the landscape and trace that downstream. You can also discover items along that route, such as stream gauges or water quality sampling points, or if they're in the database, bridges, bridge crossings, pipelines, railways, things that you can address to the river network that you can then later find through this network navigation. The other really important discussion here, and this is an old slide from 2017, is the USGS has ballpark 8,000 real-time active streamflow gauging stations in the country. And at any one time, you can go into those and you can get a real-time discharge from those stream gauges. That network of information is really important because if you have a spill or if you have any kind of response along the rivers, you're going to need to know real-time discharge. You're going to want to know velocity. You're going to want to probably know temperature and some other items. So now we're going to jump over from USGS stream gauging, stream stats. We'll talk a little bit about the dye tracing studies and time of travel application. So USGS has a long history of doing dye tracer studies, essentially injecting rhodamine dye into the rivers and measuring the amount of time it takes for that dye to travel downstream. That dye is soluble, conservative, transport material. So essentially you're truly measuring the river velocities for reaches of river. So rather than going out and doing a measurement at one location using any kind of method that we have for stream gauging, you're now measuring that average velocity over reach. You can do that multiple times at different discharges, and then for that particular reach, you can create a curve or a relationship between discharge and velocity. After doing many of these studies, a USGS scientist researcher developed this idea that, hey, I can take all these studies and I can put them together and with basin characteristics, and I can develop a regional regression that says I can estimate velocity based upon these attributes of these basins. And so essentially that equation is velocity is a function of your drainage area, your mean annual stream flow, your stream flow at the time of the incident, or whatever you're trying to measure, and then your drainage area. Slope was the other one. So within this research work, Harvey Jobson put together two equations. One equation was the most probable velocity of the peak, and the other one was the maximum probable. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, you have a regression equation, and then you have these input variables. And here's where we talk about most probable velocity. That's essentially the best fit of the regression. That's the best predictor. And from that most probable velocity, you can then estimate the leading edge, peak, and trailing edge of a distribution, a dye tracer curve response. If you have known concentrations, you can also estimate the peak. The maximum probable is essentially the envelope curve, where he took all these dye tracer studies and said, here's an envelope curve where no velocity was greater than this value. We're going to call that the maximum probable. And we're going to say that, using these regression equations, no velocity of anything traveling in the stream should be faster than this velocity that's the envelope velocity. Again, these are based upon dye tracer studies. So there's soluble conservative contaminants. There's stream flow limitations, is that generally speaking, your dye tracers were done between low flow to bank full. It was too expensive typically to throw in dye during a flood scenario. And then because this is velocity of river reaches, it doesn't do well with dams, reservoirs, lakes, or karst areas. We'll talk a little bit more about this probably in the Q&A session, but these issues can be addressed over time. Essentially, what we're building is an initial emergency response model that can be used quickly. It's publicly available on a web application to get estimates out there. I started the conversation with stream stats because in stream stats, we can get river slope, river length, drainage area, mean annual discharge, and to some degree, real-time discharge. And then from the user, you need to know spill mass, spill location, and then again, we'll talk about this, but real-time discharge. Moving quickly on, essentially we are funded through two different grant applications to the Inland Oil Spill Preparedness Program. I'll keep this brief. Phase one was essentially to build the background, the services, and to look at spill response, spill planning, and stream flow estimation, as well as to bring in the database of those time of travel studies. Phase 2 was to build the user interface, the client, to use those services and create those estimates for travel time. Because of timing, dependencies on other code, and developer availability, we actually didn't get started on that project until really late. And we're actually running those 2 different grants together to develop the application at the same time. Jumping over to the application, this is, in development version of the application. And there we go, refreshing it. The development version, we were hoping for a Q2 beta release. We're really close to that. We still have a handful of formatting on the client and things to make it look good. But we're gonna quickly jump in, do a demonstration. I've got about 4 minutes left. Essentially, we have 2 different workflows. There's a spill response. Essentially, we're tracing downstream and looking at travel times in the downstream direction. And then there's a spill planning. Essentially, you might have a critical piece of infrastructure and you want to look upstream and see what travel times are on different streams or on different branches of that stream to see what's most critical to your location. We're going to go real quickly through the demonstration. There is a configure button here where you can change it from metric to imperial. Jumping really quickly in, I'm going to do spill response, and I'm going to click on the river where we happen to have a spill in 2011 on the Yellowstone River in Montana. Some of you probably responded to that. Again, we're doing a live demonstration. Nothing ever goes as quickly as you want. So here in that response, essentially from that click point, we traced downstream 100 kilometers on the Yellowstone River. We brought data in from NHD Plus version 2 data set. It identifies gauging stations along that reach. Right now we're getting both active and discontinued gauges. So some of these gauges may not have real-time data. Jumping over, it says, hey, look, we found these 6 or 7 stream gauges along this reach. From knowing this, I know that this one is the only one that's active. It's currently in ice condition, so the stream flow value is actually a -999. So right now, I'm not actually able to get a stream flow from that. If we have a spill, we have to come up with another means to get that stream flow. On the input, if we know that spill happened 3 hours ago at 12:30 local time, we had 500 kilograms of mass spilled. And let's say we knew in cubic meters per second that it was 120 at the time of the spill, we can now do an estimate of travel time. So again, this is using NHD Plus version 2 data. As we zoom in and out on the map, you're going to see that the flow lines don't necessarily agree with the topo map that we have. Remember that this is an older version of NHD Plus. The NHD is coming out with NHD Plus high res, which will be higher resolution data, better agreement with maps. The services that we use to get this information and data, as soon as NHD Plus high res is nationally ready, our services will roll over and use NHD Plus high res. So now, as this response, it came back and it calculated the most probable velocities for this reach. You can come in, you can look at the discharge, drainage area, and then the length downstream or distance downstream from the spill. And for each segment, it gives you a segment velocity. So in this case, that's the velocity in meters per second. And then how long it is supposed to take for the leading edge to get there in hours, how long for the peak concentration to get there in hours, and then how long for that response curve to trail off to 10% of that peak value. Really quickly, then you can say, okay, I want to scroll down here and say, our response teams have to be out in 24 hours after the spill. Where is that 24-hour mark on this map? It'll highlight the line here. I can zoom out and say, okay, here's my 24-hour mark of where that's going to be. Let's look downstream and find a road crossing or a bridge. I should have done an example that was closer to a bridge. You might have to go a long ways. Coming back quickly to that. So here is that line segment. Visually, we'll look at, it's kind of on this jog of the river. Now we're going to switch to maximum probable velocity. And now we're going to find the 24-hour mark on this particular computation. Excuse me while I find that location. And now we can see that it's on this stretch where before it was over here. So using the maximum probable, we're pretty confident that, reach velocities and the travel time didn't get any further than that location. Really quickly, let's take questions while I pull up the upstream workflow.
Okay, do we have a question? I see at least one question in the box there. Jenna or Lindsay?
Yes, the question is from Kurt Hansen. What is the option if you do not have flow data? Can you use tide charts? And can you collect current data in situ?
So if you do not have real-time stream flow data, we are building the tools to go upstream and downstream to find gauges. But like in this case, we just saw that, we're in ice conditions for that stream gauge. If you jump over into INWIS and start looking at, they still report gauge heights for that. So you can get an idea based upon gauge heights and the stage discharge curve where that particular gauge stream flow would be. Because I'm in this workflow now, I'm not going to jump back and show you, but at one point where I was putting the mass and the discharge value in, each flow line had an actual discharge value associated with it. So if you had someone in the field measure a discharge value or a stream flow, we can go in and you can put that in under that particular location for that stream flow line. The piece that we still need to talk about getting added is, okay, now you have a real-time discharge. How do we adjust that real-time discharge going in the downstream direction? And that's one of the pieces that we're working on. Real quickly, I did an upstream trace, and then you can see upstream where the gauges are, and then color coding, which we're still working on that. It's pretty rough right now, but based upon how long it takes for travel times upstream, you can see different pieces of color coding. And right now we don't have an output table for this, but you can see here how the upstream can be useful because, it might take 4 hours to this location, but 8 hours to this location. More questions?
No more questions.
Feel free to. Oh,
Are
sorry.
you through? Are you all through, Peter?
I am, yes.
Okay. Well, I just want to let you know that, once a few years ago, when OSPR took over inland response, we started building these geographic response plans. And we had intentions of creating a similar tool, although nowhere near as sophisticated. We had 2 attempts, 2 different people. We had a student and then one of our staff GIS professionals. And using NHD and even NHD plus, we found it to be very, very lacking in the information that we needed. So I'm afraid to say we're back at throwing oranges into the stream with a stopwatch. Okay, so your tool is very welcome.
Yeah, some background there is that when I did my diatracer studies here in Montana for the 3 studies that I did, I actually used Jobson's equations to estimate those travel times, and it works pretty well. Now in an oil response situation, you might say it's 4 hours off over a 24-hour period. It doesn't work well, but it's still, it's a rough estimate. It's a rough estimate where we don't have other data or information because it works for every NHD reach, where typically the better models that, I'm sure you guys are going to hear about this week are calibrated to certain reaches where you have lots of data. You're very data rich in those locations.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. And